this show on the road, people. Let's get this show on the road. That's if I've plugged this in well. Let me see. Is it coming through alright or not? Un momento. Right, just sharing this. All right. إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضاه ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فالسلام الله على القوم. أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا. 欢迎来自 bienvenidos a todos. خوش آمدید بخیر راغله and swagatam people, swagatam. Right, marhaban to the first of 2019 people. 2019, a very blessed and happy new year to you all. Allahu Akbar. That's what we're talking about, folks. A whole year has passed us by. Wow, all right, those of you, what is up, Robert? What's up, fam? It's all chilling. It's all chilling. All right. Finally have a Nicholas. All right. All right. ¿Cómo usted? ¿Qué tal? What's going on, man? Right, people. A new year. Wow. You know, there was a summary of of 2018. Somebody had made some clip or something saying, you know, do you recall this was in 2018? Do you recall this? They said, do you recall the Olympics were in 2018? I mean, I honestly have no recollection of that. I was like, whoa, was that in 2018? So I don't know whether that was just a blag of a video clip or my memory's been wiped. But nevertheless, to another year of absolute awesomeness, people. You know, we need to have a very positive kind of outlook. We need to think good. There's an amazing hadith which I really like. It depends how you understand it. But the way I understand it, it's a hadith Qudsi. And, you know, the meaning, nevertheless, is what is important. And it states that Allah says, Ana inda abdi ka dhannihi bi. That I treat my slave as he expects of me, as he thinks I will treat him or her. And I find that amazing to just, you know, just the thought of that. So if you think Allah, you know, good things will happen, then good things will happen, people. That's the summary, the gist of that. That if you're a pessimistic person and you always kind of think of like bad things, like, oh my God, what about this, what about... Then it is very likely that bad things will come your way. And that may not, you know, it may just be per chance. I mean, it may just be down to, you know, or it may be that your mindset zones in on these things and amplifies them, whereas normal people, you know, wouldn't maybe focus on them as much. So either way, I think we should always be very positive. And a new year is a time to reflect on yourself, to kind of think, All right, people tuning in, ahlan wa sahlan. Is that Mu'adh? You're doing it, you're doing it. Fayaz Khan says, Khadim Rizvi wants to debate you from jail. Khadim Rizvi Sahib. Damat barakatuhum. Hadir labbaik wa sa'daik. Right, anytime. Ghulam Mustafa to hazir hain. Aap boliyo to sahi. Khadim Hussain Sahib. Right, so one of our favorites to mention and speak of. Right, so yeah, so as I was saying, it's a great time to sometimes to take a moment to just think, okay, where am I? Let me set some targets. And these things, some people, they get all astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Wait, I gotta do the proper, the Oscar nominated. Let me get this and make this into my astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Haram, kufr. The only thing haram and kufr was those deformed genes that made it to you. They were the only thing haram and kufr. Right, so some people say, oh, New Year's, astaghfirullah, this is haram, kufr, and imitating the kuffar, and you're imitating the kuffar blood, you're imitating the kuffar. Right, well, so that's obviously all nonsense. Anybody saying that is obviously, in the words of who I'll be speaking a little more on later on, Asrar Rashid, you are ignorant. Well, we're going to come to that review a little later on today on Village Wars. But you see, these New Year resolutions, things like this, are not haram, contrary to genetically deformed opinion. Right, so, but this is simply an opportunity to just revisit your goals and targets in life. And you see, many of the Salaf used to have different targets. I mean, some people would revisit themselves on a daily basis. People like Sayyidina Umar radiallahu an, each night at a certain point in his life, he would revisit himself and his goals and his aspirations, and also take into account his actions, accountability, self-accountability. And he would say, Hasibu anfusakum, he would advise people to do that. Qabla an tuhasabu, take yourself into account, revisit yourself before it's too late. Some people maybe, much later, some people on an annual basis, and this. So yeah, what have we learnt last year? What have we studied? What have we achieved? I don't know, whether it's personal goals, whether it's educational goals, academic goals, work goals, ilm. We should always have some kind of ilmi growth taking place. Always, I believe. Never stagnate. Push that. Stimulate yourselves. Learn something. It's never too late to learn, people. Never. Learn a language. Begin. Ibda'u bil Arabiya. Begin with Arabic. And then and other languages too. I'm not just restricting it to Arabic. Somebody's asking me, have you taken up a sport yet? I find no interest in sports, honestly. I just can't. I just don't see the fascination. I mean, don't get me wrong on health. I understand the fascination of health, and I am addicted to the gym. There's no doubt about that. I mean, recently I've been taking up a lot more, in comparison to my normal schedule, a lot more cardiovascular kind of exercises as well and stuff like that. But, so I appreciate the health aspect, but I'm not at all intrigued by sport. I mean, maybe, you know, people play a game or something, but I just don't see the fascination in it. And I think I've got so many other things to do that why pick up a boring habit like that at this stage in life? Now, did you see any Spanish chicks? Hi, toba, astaghfirullah. Huh? Yeah. Did I see any? Where was I meant to be looking? Inbox me. So, can you break down your gym routine? Yes, sure, of course, inshallah. Another day. Is it permissible to sit in a gathering when Muslims are drinking? Muslims are openly drinking. Right, so... Right, I mean, what interesting gatherings. What gatherings are you in? They're like, yaar, ho jaye yaar. Cheers, man. Cheers, man. Cheers. Right, so, well, people, you know, many years ago, I was speaking about learning languages. When I was studying Arabic, and this is in the late 90s, I was in Damascus University. So I went there for a little while. Part of my adventures took me to Damascus University. I was partially shocked. But, I mean, this is, I suppose, well, anyway, it's a different story. Let's leave that for another day. But when I was in Damascus University, in my class, this was in Arabic studies, there was the class was mainly non-Muslim, by the way. There was this guy, really old. I mean, when I say really old, I mean compared the fact that I was at the time only 18, just turned 18. This guy was in his 60s. He was white. He wasn't Muslim. I'm trying to, and he'd come over from America actually, and he was just intrigued in the Arabic language, and he wanted to learn, and he was learning and studying, and it's amazing to just see that. And that was, I mean, he was okay. He was at an intermediate level. He wasn't like an absolute beginner. He wasn't so advanced, but he was okay considering his age, and he'd begun not so long ago. It just goes to show, I mean, the reason that, you know, it just came to my mind was when I had mentioned about learning languages, that age should never be a barrier. So long as you have the capacity, the capability, then by all means. Right, did you get a massage in Spain? In Latin, you. Oh. Well, what? Huh? Were you watching? Right. So, what is up with the people on my post? Huh? On this. Is it permissible to shake hands with women? Do the everywhere you go. Some really weird, creepy handshake. Remember that guy from, what was that comedy where he's got the where he's got that funny hand and he's. But anyway, I've got a whole video on shaking hands with the opposite gender, and it is permissible. It's not haram. You can watch my clip on YouTube. I go through it in much more detail, explain the hadith, explain those hadith that claim that the Prophet shook hands, and those that claim that it wasn't the Prophet, but on behalf of the Prophet, the companions, they took the bay'ah. I go through those hadith. I show the hadith that many of the leading companions would shake hands with women. and how, although it wasn't generally so much of a custom, but it isn't haram either, and in some Muslim countries it is a custom, in others it isn't. I do explain that there isn't a single Sahih Sarih hadith to explain that it is haram. Not a single one, not even one, to explain it's haram. And the famous hadith that people keep using, I go through that to show it's actually weak. How can a person regain trust of scholars in the West after the whole Bukhari Gate saga? Alright, Bukhari Gate. Those of you that haven't watched my Bukhari Gate clip, you need to do so. It was about the authenticity of the hadith in Bukhari, that we can't be really so certain that Sahih Bukhari today can be traced back to the Imam himself. And in most likelihood, I'm sure a certain amount of it most likely is from him, but there's a lot of doubt about a substantial amount of Sahih Bukhari, that who actually authored and placed those hadith in the book. It's just, so I've got a whole detailed video on that, so you can watch that. But yeah, does that in any, did you visit Sueta? Nope, I didn't know, no. Right, so that doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't detract from trust. It depends. When you say, how can we trust scholarship? What does that mean, to trust scholarship? I think all people are motivated by self-interest. I think it's understandable that people will write or push ideas to kind of, and they have an agenda. That makes sense. Everybody, to some extent, has their own agenda. Now, does that mean that we can never trust scholarship at all? I think the greatest thing is that, you see, scholars are pushing ideas, and you always have your own sense of reason by which you can filter, you can weigh, you can analyze what's being presented. You have your own reason, your voice of reason to do that. So I would say that, yes, you can trust scholarship as much as you need to trust it. I mean, it doesn't need to be a blind trust, as in whatever the person says, I don't need to hear anything else. I think that's blind following. I'm not in support of blind following. But I believe you can trust, you can have reasonable, or what I would like to call good enough trust. So if I can coin that term, that good enough trust, as they use this term in a lot of psychology as well and stuff like this. Mola Jat, Mola Jat. People, have you seen the new trailer? Oof. Toba, toba, toba. Oh my God, the legend of Mola Jat. Oh, it looks epic. That's something everybody is looking forward to now. And I think it's actually interesting, I'd like to share my thoughts on this, not on Mola Jat per se. Oh, Mola. Mola nu Mola na mare ta Mola ne marda. Oh! Not on Mola Jat. Mola Jat is a Pakistani character. There's a classic movie. For those of you that are unfamiliar, there was a classic movie made in 1979, I think it was. Right, so a very long time ago. But it became a super hit in that part of the world, and it remained on cinema for something like 5 years, I think. That's how popular it was. But it's basically about the rivalry of these two people, Mola Jat and Nuri Nat. Right. Played at that time by Sultan Rai and Mustafa Qureshi. But I want to mention something quite interesting here. Not so much to do with the film, although the film it's there as an example, but our understanding of religion. and Islam. Now you're going to think, what has that got to do with Mullah Jat? Right. Well, people, it does have something to do with it. Right. Now, the old movie was a super hit, and it's actually, if you're ever bored and you want to watch something for a comedy, it's actually so funny they're not trying to be funny, but the dialogues, you would die laughing of the dialogues. But this movie became such a hit, and it was an unofficial sequel. An unofficial sequel to a movie that had preceded called Vahshi Jat. All these crazy Vahshi Jat. But the issue was that this movie became a pivotal point in Pakistani cinema. And the reason I want to mention this is because in this year, 1979, I believe it was, that General Zia, who was in control of Pakistan, was undergoing the Islamization of Pakistan. Okay, he was trying to Islamize, forcibly and artificially Islamize Pakistan. He was changing the names of things into like very Arabicized names. He was trying to push a whole different culture. He was trying to, he had this whole Islamic thing going on. Now, part of his Islamic, part of his whole, not movement, but his administrative orders was to censor the media and the Pakistani cinema industry. Now, this is really interesting. Prior to this, the late 70s, the Pakistani movies, and this is where it links into Islam, and I want us to focus on this. Pay attention to this interesting point. Prior to this, Pakistani cinema was pretty much centered on sentimental, romantic movies. Not that I've watched any of them, definitely, but this is how it was. So if you look at Pakistani movies prior to General Zia, they were mainly just romantic, sentimental movies. Now what happened, General Zia, part of his Islamization process, he banned the open display of affection in cinema because he saw it as anti-Islam. Now, I want us to focus on this because this will resonate with a lot of people. His understanding was that to display openly or publicly affection between the genders is haram. And therefore, none of these movies should be passed. So hence they were censored. So this movie, Mullah Jat, which is an incredibly, obviously, a violent movie, became a super hit. To be fair, I mean, it was, for its time, well made, and the dialogues were really good for its time. Now, this set into motion, because what you have is, Mullah Jat is this character who has this weapon called a gandasa, which is like a tall, almost axe. That's what it's like. But it's not actually used for an axe. I think they actually use it to cut sugarcane or something. But it's like that. It's like a long spear kind of thing, but instead it's got this kind of round axe thing on it. And they call it a gandasa in Urdu, Hindi. Now, this movie set about what became known as the gandasa culture in Pakistan, which meant that movies for the next decade all released violent kind of movies centering around this gandasa, that everybody goes around, chop people up and do all of this. Now, pause that for a moment. What's interesting, folks, and I want you to pay attention to this. You see, this was allowed. Like, no scholars, the clergy, many religious folks have no problem in seeing violence. It's only affection that they have a problem with. You see, like, they banned romance because they saw this as haram. Now, nobody saw violence as haram. Like, they didn't see that. Now, I'm not personally, I mean, I don't have a problem watching movies, whether they're violent or not. But what I'm trying to say is that look at the concept. Like, let's get into the minds of these religious people. They didn't see an issue with, you know, people shooting countless people, chopping them up with axes and these gandasas and doing all these kind of things. What they saw was an open display of romance is haram. And it should be banned because it will corrupt our youth. You see, they saw romance as corrupting, but they didn't see violence as corrupting. And they still don't. Like, the clergy don't see violence as something despicable, or I mean, they might. I'm not saying they necessarily advocate violence. I'm not saying that. Some of them may, but I'm not saying all clergy or religious people advocate violence. They don't. But they don't deem it as haram as they deem romance. Like, romance to them is utterly haram and disgusting. Like, this will corrupt our children. It will, you know, they'll fall in love and they will do this and they will do that. But they don't see the open display of bloodshed as a problem. They don't think, well, this will be, and that's just fascinating to ponder over. And the evidence for this was, like, I mean, this, taking this as an example, the Gandasa culture of the 80s in Pakistani, in Lollywood, Pakistani kind of cinema, it took a turn from romance. For decades, it was running on just romance. But when the Islamic people had a say to censor romance, it became violent, and violence was allowed. And you had a whole decade of pure bloodshed, you know, Molla Jat kind of culture, filling the minds of people that this is okay to aspire to. And I just find that as a fascinating kind of observation. So it's just some food for thought. You know, because that how we, and I don't think just Islam, I think Christianity has had a similar approach. Many religions, they seem to have a disdain for romance and affection. They really seem to have a strong condemnation towards that. But yet towards violence, they, you know, even if they don't advocate it, they're not as perturbed by violence. And I find that a fascinating, like I said, observation, a social human observation. And I think maybe the exception to that historically was perhaps Hinduism. I think Hinduism, in its very ancient form, celebrated, I suppose, kind of the whole the whole Kama Sutra, the teachings of love. So I suppose it was very different. Although today, I think, unfortunately, the right wing, the rise of the right wing, Hindutva and stuff like this. But I think in the ancient Hindu teachings, that was an interesting side they had and focused on, that many other religions didn't really focus on. I mean, Christianity kind of, I think, was amongst the worst. Islam, it depends. You can see some of that side in it, but unfortunately, the scholars that came after, the institutionalization kind of robbed it of any of that affection, I guess. Right, so how come I'm on, not karma, Mutiur Rahman wrote, what's karma? It's kama. Kama in Sanskrit means muhabbat, ishq, love. Not karma. Karma is your deeds coming back to haunt you. Which, to be fair, sometimes I suppose that can happen through through karma as well. So anyway, Mufti, what? I'm trying to read these. What's your take on when the throne of Sheba was brought to Solomon. I've got a whole video on that, Zoyeb. Do watch it. Have you read the Are you from Azad Kashmir or Punjab originally? Wah, a lot of ethnic questions today. Wah, wah, wah. Well, I suppose both, I guess. I take it. Well, when I did my DNA test and it came back saying you're 100% Punjabi, I was like, huh? I was like, Dad? ये क्या हो गया? Well, and then upon doing research, I realized that, ethnically, 80% of Azad Kashmir is ethnically Punjabi, that people who must have migrated, God knows when, centuries and centuries, maybe millennia ago, but the people that migrated. So that was an interesting research, nevertheless. It was interesting to, but that's for another day, I guess. I am very fascinated in that side of things as well, on things like the history of Azad Kashmir or Kashmir as a whole, and looking into things like that. I did, when my research and asking people and things like this, I came to realize that places like Mirpur, all of these fell under the district of Jammu in pre-partition. And they are actually a part of that geographical part of Jammu, which is then a part of Jammu Kashmir as a whole. But nevertheless, that's a discussion for another day. Right, so what's going on, people? What's going on? What's on your mind? Well, I was on a break, people. It's good to take some time out. Went to Cyprus, chilling out. It was good, but God, honestly, tell you, my kids, or my one daughter specifically, is such a nightmare. I think she was going to destroy the whole of Cyprus, but well, she totally wrecked almost the hotel. Oh, well, I mean, this is just at the age of 4. So, God, I wonder what will come. Right, what else has been going on? So because of that, I couldn't do my lives. I missed the fact that it was Ghalib's anniversary, people. Ghalib, the legend of Urdu poetry. Those of you that can read Urdu, and those of you that do understand Urdu, I think you definitely should take a liking or an interest in poetry, because Urdu has a magnificent resource, really, of poetry. I mean, it's so enriched with poetry. So I definitely think, and those of you that can understand some Urdu, I think you should learn Urdu, Hindi, whatever. I mean, I think these are beautiful languages amongst many countless beautiful languages. But Ghalib, yep, it was his birthday, people. And I think, all right, what a legend. So I didn't get a chance to. So on that note, I mean, I'll suppose say a few words about him. He is amongst my favorite poets, a legend, Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib. That was his name. He was born in the late 1700s, I know that, and he died in, I think it was 1869 or something like that. Now, he was somebody who really kind of, he restructured almost part of Urdu, or he was involved, he was amongst the pioneers who kind of reshaped what will become the kind of the benchmark of Urdu poetry to come. He was a contemporary of the King Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was the last of the Mughal kings before the British dethroned him and they didn't execute him, but they blinded him and sent him into exile. And that was the end of the Mughal dynasty. But Ghalib, he lived in Delhi most of his life. And he did spend time in Agra as well, which is where the Taj Mahal is, people. But Agra, previously, I believe it was called Akbarabad, if I'm correct. And this is a name they've resorted to. And Ghalib has left his book called Diwan-e Ghalib, his poetry, and it's amazing. And he was somebody who was very proud and almost arrogantly proud about himself. And I think you see that in his poems. And it has a cool kind of aspect to it. So he says in his words, praising Mir, actually. He did meet Mir. Mir was the absolute don of Urdu poetry. But Ghalib was a very young, he was like just a boy when he met Mir. And he says, Rekhte ke tum hi ustad nahi ho Ghalib. So he says that Rekhta is the old name for Urdu. He says that you're not the only don of Rekhta Ghalib. Rekhta, Rekhte ke tum hi ustad nahi ho Ghalib. Suna hai agle zamane mein koi Mir bhi tha. That I've heard that in the previous generations there was somebody called Mir as well. And some people say this is him taking the mick out of Mir, but I think he isn't. He is actually rating, he does rate Mir. But Ghalib has he touches up on a lot of topics in his love. A lot of them touch up on love, alcohol. Ghalib loved his drink. So I've quoted sometimes Ghalib's poem where he says, Ghalib chuti sharab par abbi kabhi kabhi. That, Ghalib, I've left drinking, but even now and then, it's got to be done, now and then. So Ghalib was one of those, and he has, let me think of some solid lines of his. He has one which is really, he has so many which are so fascinating. But his Mana ke taghaful na karoge lekin, that he says, taghaful is when somebody pretends to be unaware. It's an Arabic word. It's not that they're unaware, but they're pretending to be unaware. So, somebody I know they're looking at me, but I'm still pretending that I haven't noticed, like this. So in Arabic and in Urdu, this is called taghaful. It comes from the word ghafla, right? So he says, Mana ke taghaful na karoge lekin khak ho jayenge hum tumhe khabar hone tak. That he says, yet we'll become dust. It will take that, meaning it's going to take you so long to notice us. So that's an amazing Don line of Ghalib. Oh, what else comes to mind of Ghalib? His I think it's of the same poem actually, that he says, Gham-e zindagi ka asad hai juz marg ilaj. That life, the only solution to life, the problems of life, it's a bit depressive, he says, is death. Meaning that problems will go on. And this is something that I've said to people often, that it's not the problem, but your ability to solve them that counts. So he says that the problem, gham-e hasti ka kisse, no, gham-e zindagi ka asad kisse ba juz marg ilaj. And marg is the Farsi word, Persian word for death. So beyond death, what is the ilaj of the cure to the problems in life? That shama har rang mein jalti hai sahar hone tak. That a flame, that a candle will burn in all colors and flames. Like if you see the flame on a candle and the way it will wither and the kind of shades that the flame will take in its color. He says that it will take all colors until dawn, meaning that, and by that time, well, it's dawn anyway. So, and this is an amazing poem of his to just, where he speaks about life and things like this. But I definitely invite you all to explore poets like that. And he has an interesting one where he says, Kabe, speaking about the Kaaba, Kabe kis muh se jaoge ghalib, sharam tumko magar nahi aati. That Ghalib, with what face, like how will you face the Kaaba? That have you no shame, for God's sake? So this is something Ghalib addresses himself by. But right, so that's gone on. What else? Somebody had asked about Qadir Khan. See, since we were speaking about cinema and people and celebrities and Ghalib, Qadir Khan has also passed away, a legendary famous actor. May Allah grant him and anybody who's passed away and elevated maqam in Jannatul Firdaus and oversee, forgive their shortcomings. Somebody had asked that if I could make a mention about him, and why not, of course. He was somebody who was the son of a Maulana. His father was actually an Islamic scholar. And from what I heard was that Qadir Khan resigned, at an old age, not resigned, but retired from acting and resorted to a lot of community work and helped out a lot of Islamic institutes as well, and even designed some of the Islamic syllabus and stuff like this. This is from what I've heard, Allahu A'lam. Right, so let's move on, people. What are some questions? Today's topics. What is going on? Well, I noted some questions people had asked. Right. The North Sentinelese people. Somebody had asked me about, I'd spoken previously about the North Sentinelese people from the North Sentinel Islands and how they were an isolated community for maybe, 30,000 years plus, something like that, 40,000 years. And the Christian evangelist that tried to kind of go across to them and they killed him. So somebody had asked, what about Islam? Are we not obligated to take Islam to them? Oh, Wara Chacha. You don't need to take Islam to them and murder them with your viruses, for God's sake. Right, well, they're going to murder you anyway. Do we not need to take Islam to them? Right. The things people have justified in the name of God. I don't want to do it. God wants me to do it. These are what we call delusions of grandeur. Right, so no, you don't need to take Islam to them. It's okay, don't worry. They have a Lord, and the Lord will cater for them, inshallah. I think it's, from a theological perspective, the question that's being asked, you see, people don't, yes, the message of Islam is here, and yes, generally we are to give the good news and to talk reason and talk about these things where possible. But it doesn't mean to force or to kind of to shove this down people's throats, so to speak, or to kind of just become obsessed with this da'wah. That was never the message of Islam. Muslims were never obsessed with this da'wah the way today some Western Muslims are behaving. Today some Western some Western Muslims almost have this obsession of, I need to take Islam, I need to do these things. And in all honesty, that is just a reflection of their own inner insecurities and them wishing to exert some control on other people even if it's at a subconscious level. But that is what it appears to be, that they're trying to exert some kind of control in the name of God, of course. So you see people historically, for example, like Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, the great Maliki legend from Muslim Spain, almost 900 years ago, in his commentary on Tirmidhi in Aridatul Ahwadi, he writes that, it's recommended, he says, once a year, as a strategy. He mentions this. He says, for the authorities, not him, not the Muslims, he says for the authorities to extend da'wah to the neighboring Christian countries and states. Once a year, he says, mustahab. It's a recommended thing, not an obligation. He says it's mustahab, that it's recommended. Because look, people don't embrace Islam like that anyway. It doesn't work like that anymore. The days of old have gone. When people are looking for new gods and new religion, is saturated. The market is now saturated. It doesn't work like, in the olden days, people were looking for gods of new. And they were searching and for something to liberate them from that. And then that time is kind of like sealed up. Humanity now is very different. We don't live in a world like that anymore, that somebody's going to come to you with a new god and people, in droves will kind of flock to this new god. It doesn't work like that. Of course, God is just one. What I'm trying to say is religion is no longer the motivating force for people worldwide. And it hasn't been for a few centuries. Okay, religion is an important element in everybody's life and in most people's lives. I mean, don't get me wrong there, but it's no longer like in the days of old. That's what I'm saying. So we need to, really step out of this obsession. This obsession really, that's my analysis, is because second generation Muslims in this country who are like children of immigrants, Muslim immigrants to this country, I mean, generations of which I'm included. Now, they have had to rediscover faith for themselves. And this part of rediscovering something is that it triggers insecurities. So one of the stages that you go through is a sense of affirmation. Now, this stage of affirmation begins externally. So you begin by demonstrating to others that you are part of this belonging. So usually it will become that stage has a uniform stage to it. So you will adopt a uniform. This happens it's not just religion. You can see this with other groups as well. Once people enter a certain stage, they will adopt a particular uniform. This is really to show others more than it is for them, because they want to push out to the world that I have now become a part of this belonging. That is what is happening at the subconscious level. Now, people will recognize them for that. That recognition consolidates their own inner belief structure or their affiliation. So it kind of re-cements it for them and makes it stronger for them. So this is all part of that kind of, and then people wanting to recruit others. This is once again part of reconsolidating and reinforcing your own belief structures. Because so long as you're telling others about it, you must kind of firmly believe in it. So this is at a subconscious level. I mean, if you psychoanalyze a lot of what's going on, and it's not just to do with young Muslims or Muslims. It can be part of anything. When people become a part of a tribe, a group, a gang, they all exhibit very similar ostensible behaviors that are easily identified and classified. And they all fall into the same kind of thing, like this affirmation, adopting a uniform, calling others, doing this. It doesn't matter whether it's a gang, whether it's a tribe, whether it's a religion, they all go through these kind of things. And hence, when you reach a secure state of faith, you stop kind of worrying about other people. Hence, these scholars in the past never used to be anything like these people today. Because they were very secure about their faith. You know, they didn't need to worry about it being in clothing. They didn't need to worry about it being in a beard. They didn't need to worry about becoming obsessed about calling people to Islam, stuff like that. So yeah, so I hope that does help. What is your view regarding the SRE the government will make compulsory in 2020, which will promote homosexuality, transgender, taught to kids from aged 4? Right, okay. I have heard about some of this going on. I mean, my understanding, to be fair, is I'm not happy with imposing sexuality or any of these things onto children, and I feel, so I am opposed to any kind of imposition that any government should bring. I believe that this is unnatural to be kind of forcing gender politics and sexuality politics onto children. I'm totally against any of that. I feel that you should just let children be children, okay? Let them grow up in the innocence of their childhood. And then, sure, I mean, as they approach, secondary school, I mean, and maybe even 1 year before that, or that kind of time, introducing them to these kind of topics, I think, to me, I'm fine with that. At that age, but this age 4, 5, 6, I mean, I think that I am disturbed about that. I'm not happy about these kind of things, so I think that there should be some kind of collective voice. But you know something, this is not just Islamic. This is not just, we shouldn't isolate ourselves as in make this a Muslim thing. There's many people who are part of just the general British public that will have an issue with this. They don't need to be Muslim to have an issue with this. So what I would advise is that when we want to share or raise a collective voice, it should be a widespread, unilateral. It should be a kind of a collectivist voice. It should be a British voice. It should not just be a Muslim voice. I'm opposed to this kind of, this ghettoization of just Muslims, making everything about Islam. This is not about Islam. This is just about children being used as instruments for sexuality politics. Because some people are, like, let's say, some people feel that there's a rise in homophobia or stuff like this. So they want to they want to get children indoctrinated to accept something. So I feel that this is we shouldn't just, I've seen some people saying, oh, in such and such Islamic center, in such and such mosque, they're going to do talks. Maulanas are going to do talks on this. Oh, for God's sake. Oh, baksh do yaar. This is not necessarily a Maulana thing, right? This is just a normal human thing. Like, we as normal people, they can raise, you don't need to do Islamic speeches on this. Sure, take action. Take the correct protocol on what to do. Raise a concern, a parliamentarian kind of, what would bring in parliamentarian action. Delivering Islamic lectures is going to get you nowhere. In fact, if anything, it's going to make people push this even more. because they're going to see this as some kind of Islamic reaction. And people hate Islam. Let's just be real, right? They don't want, people abhor the term Islam now, right? Non-Muslims, even if they don't want to say it to us, they are so fed up with Islam. So stop making this an Islamic thing and just generally raise it as the concern it is, and people will listen. Because as a citizen, you have the right to raise your voice, and there are non-Muslims who will echo your concerns. So that's because people are just really fed up with all this, all this like political correctness. And this is what gives rise to the far right. Because they keep saying, see these Muslimics, and at New Year's, was it New Year's Eve or New Year's Day? There was an attack in Greater Manchester or somewhere, right? I saw some video clip. Some guy they'd arrested for stabbing an old couple or something. And I don't know whether he had mental health issues. I think he did have mental health issues. But the clip I saw, and this was a clip of somebody, I think, on Snapchat recording him. The police had arrested him, and he's saying, "Long live the Caliphate, Allahu Akbar." This is the kind of nonsense that it's so goddamn disturbing to hear, and it's so annoying that you think, for God's sake, another bloody, and what is, and long live the Caliphate. What Caliphate? What Caliphate are you on about? Long live the Caliphate. Did your dad run with a separate caliphate that's been going on? So, what caliphate? What, the Ottomans? Are you on about the Ottomans? What are they on about? Nobody's even read history. What caliphate? This is the thing. Nobody has any idea. Inshallah, this is why when I did a history course on Al-Andalus, the whole reason was to demonstrate the rise and fall and show that these things are always political. There has been no caliphate. Okay, let's get that. I mean, if what you mean by caliphate is the name of Muslim empire, then there have been many caliphates. There have been many Muslim empires. Those empires couldn't give a damn about people like you and me, regular Muslims. They were just politics. They were just people who were in control that couldn't care less about their own people. They were just in it for power. And that's almost 98% of the time always been the case. The Ottomans had a constant practice of fratricide. As soon as they came in, they would murder their brothers. That was a common practice. In fact, some of the Hanbali ulama even gave them the fatwa that it's permissible. So this, and these people say, they call them, the Ottomans call themselves the Khulafa. They did later on. They didn't initially used to call themselves Khulafa because they were non-Arabs. And they couldn't really care less about the Arab world. This is another thing. The Ottomans, right, you've got to understand something. These people were of like kind of Mongol descent. The actual Turkic descent is not from the Middle East. I know Turkey today falls in the Middle East, but they are not ethnically from the Middle East. These people ethnically come from Central Asia, North Central Asia. Hence today even the Turkic people are people from Turkmenistan and all those countries. And then Turkey isolated nowhere. So hence the Turkish language is not linked to any neighbouring Middle Eastern language. It's not a Middle Eastern language. The Turkish language has nothing to do with the Middle East. It comes from far up north. So the whole point of this is that the Ottomans were never interested in the Middle East or the Arab world or things like this. They were never Arabs. So they moved their capital, one of the first things they did, and then they moved it further north. And they moved it into what would have been Eastern Europe, and they were always interested in those areas where they ethnically came from and had connections to. They were never interested in this, what is Baghdad and this and that and all these places and the Middle East. I mean, they ruled over them, took the money and took everything. That's not a problem. But they were never interested in those people. So this thing of them being so Islamic people, don't get me wrong. I mean, I appreciate the history as well, but they were never. So people say when they call themselves Khulafa, look at their titles. They used the title Qaisar al-Rum. This was one of the titles that many, especially the great, Turkish kind of sultans of the Ottomans used for themselves, was the Emperor of Rome, the Caesar of Rome. That was one of their great titles, because they considered themselves the inheritors of the Roman Empire. So, just saying anyway, I mean, it's a little, I go on about these things because we have this fake nostalgia that if we go back to the Seljuks or the Abbasids or somehow we're going to be living in some paradise. No, we're not. They couldn't care less about the the subjects. But anyway, right, let's move on, people. What are some questions? I know I've got to discuss today the the village wars that have been going on. Fazlu is asking about the bi'r of Buda'a. How is this fit to bathe in? The bi'r of Buda'a was not fit to bathe in. People never used to bathe in bi'r Buda'a. Bi'r Buda'a is a well. It's a disputed well, but it's a well that existed in Medina historically. Now, this well, apparently people used to chuck all kinds of trash in it. Now, including sometimes some dead animals may fall into it and stuff like this. So, allegedly, the Prophet was asked about water from this well. And the Prophet's response, and the school of Medina, Imam Malik's school, uses this teaching as a principle. And that is that innal ma la yunajjisuhu shay. The water is not made impure illa ma ghayyarat ta'mahu wa lawnahu wa rihahu. So except that which changes. So long as these three qualities are intact, so the taste of the water, the color and the taste, and the smell. So the taste, color and smell. So long as these are pretty much water, then the water is pure, even if something impure has been dropped into it. So this is a principle that the school of Medina has adopted. So if there was a well or a large container of water and something impure dropped in it, but that impurity, let's say you remove the impurity, like let's say there was a dead animal, or let's say in this well, and they removed it, and now they took the water out, and the water still seems to be like normal water, it's got no smell to it, it doesn't seem to have any taste, it doesn't seem to, the color doesn't seem to have been stained. So in that sense, the Malik school of Medina would say you can still use this water if you want. They're not saying you have to use it, but the question was, could you use water that something, if something impure has made contact with it but hasn't impacted it? That was the question. Now, the school of Medina said you could, so long as the three qualities of water remain intact. Now, the people who disagreed with that strongly, you had, this was regardless of its quantity. Now, everybody agreed that if the water was of a huge quantity, like a lake or something like that, then everybody agrees that's fine. But we're talking about where it's in a confined space. So the Hanafiya said that in a small confined space, no. But if it was something that they say large, like they get like a pool, like they say 10 arm spans by 10 arm spans. And although Imam Abu Hanifa didn't say that, but they attribute it to Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, his student. Now, and then some people say he never said it, he was just sitting in a mosque or in a room that was that big, and he said it the size of this room. And when they measured it was 10 by 10. So But according to them, small containers, if something impure drops in it, it's too late. Even if the water looks fine, you must get rid of that water. You cannot use it. That goes with pretty much the Hanbali and the Shafi'i, except they came up with a container size, which is almost the size of a barrel, I believe. They said that if it was the size of a barrel, then it's okay. Approximately. The Arabic term was qullatayn. So there's a hadith in Abu Dawood that إذا بلغ الماء قلتين فلم يحمل خبثا, that this is the hadith, although this hadith is problematized, it's weak. But the Shafi'iyya and the Hanbali still used it. So they said anything that reaches a barrel, approximate this container size, then it makes contact with impurity, it's okay. But anything below that, no. So a bucket of water, you're taking a bath, something drops in it. And then the problem gets worse, just for the fiqh lovers out there. What about used water from wudu? So we call used water ma' al-musta'mal, that once you use, it's called used water, so you use it for a ritual. These schools claim it becomes impure. So like the Shafi'i school, the Hanafi school, the Hanbali school, they consider that water to be impure or unusable. Some of the Hanafi said it wasn't impure, but it was unusable, as in you can't use it again. Now the problem is, if that water, you're doing wudu in a bucket and that water falls back into the bucket, then these schools all have a problem with stuff like this, and some have more of a problem than others. But the school of Medina was always very kind of sound-minded, always, in my understanding, spoke from the voice of reason. It just said, look, calm yourselves down, people. You're just having a taqwa attack for no reason. The water's absolutely fine. Ma'al musta'mal, they said, is nonsense, and you can use whatever you want. Okay. So basically, simple rule was, if you come across water, you don't know what it is, but it looks, smells, tastes just like water, then it's water and you can use it. Quite simply put. I hope that explains this issue of what they call ma'at tahur. So ma'at tahur is purifying water, okay? And they call it tahir, which means it's pure, wa mutahhir. So not only is it pure, but it purifies, okay? And the Don of the Malikiya, Qadi Ismail, right, from the early Baghdadi Iraqi Malikis, who's one of my heroes, he, in his tafsir of the Quran, where Allah says that we've sent down from the sky ma'an tahura, that we sent down ma'an tahur, which is on an emphatic form, tahur, on the pattern of fa'ul, to repeatedly or excessively do something, like ghafur, to excessively forgive. So he said that water repeatedly purifies. It doesn't become impure so easily. That was some fiqh for you people. I hope that helps. It's always awesome to revisit some of these fiqh rulings. Why is sectarianism such an issue in the UK? It is, man. Tell me about it, honestly. Right, somebody had asked a question about love the Prophet more than our own family. Now, how does that hadith of the mithaq, what does that mean? Which hadith of the mithaq? Thai Pashino, personally, I don't know any Wahhabi Jinns. I've spoken to many, hope that helps. Manazza, hola, alright. Can you explain the inheritance verses? Right, okay, so this was a question that there's a hadith that لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه, and none of you have faith until I am more beloved to him than min walidihi wa waladihi wa nasi ajma'in, that more than his father and child and everybody. Now, this hadith or this teaching that the Prophet is more beloved to Muslims than our own family members, what is this talking about? This is not speaking about an emotional love, although that would be awesome, and that may be an aspiration that Muslims may have, but this is a rationalized love. Okay, so we believe and we accept. So some things you love them because you know how dear they are to you. So the Prophet to Muslims as a statement of faith is more dear to us than people generally speaking. But with this hadith had a greater meaning to it though. It didn't just, the Prophet wasn't saying this in a sense of, see this, because some people might see this as, oh, you know, why would the Prophet say something like this? He was saying this because that what he was trying to say to the people around him was that, look, I have shown you a way that is to strip you from these shackles of superstition, from the ways of old, from your tribalistic from your tribalistic attachments. Okay, now that is going to be hard for you because you are from a tribal society. Now I want you to know that this what I bring you as a messenger, that you hold me in that light more dear to you than all these things that are valuable to you. Because if you don't, it will be difficult for you to embrace this truth. Because on one hand, you'll have your father, your children, your brother, your tribe, them saying to you, oh, what the hell, you're leaving these gods and statues and you're going to worship, you know, God. I mean, just because Muhammad said so, what's wrong with you? Or you're leaving our tribe, what's wrong with... So these things were barriers to people in a tribalistic, collectivist society. So the Prophet saying this to people, that's the light, that's the angle he was coming from. Now, so that's the backdrop to this hadith. It's not just a general thing. The second thing is that, yes, to Muslims, the Prophet becomes dear because of what he's brought to us. Because he is the conduit for revelation from God. As Muslims, we embrace that. Now, this is a rationalized love, which over time may morph into an emotional love. But it doesn't mean that just because I love my child more than anything in the world, let's say, or somebody might love their parents, or they might love themselves, or they might love their partner, or they might love somebody else, they might love somebody more than anything in the world. It doesn't mean that, oh my God, you know, they're some kind of kafir. It doesn't mean that at all. Okay, so that's, and this, the scholars are very clear that this was a rationalized kind of love. Right, people, let's move on to quite a serious topic that's been brought to my attention about, I'll take a quick question. I've made a note, sorry. There was a question about women praying on their menses. Now, can women pray on their, or should women pray on their menses? Now, I've highlighted before that, look, women on their menstruation, first of all, to answer the question, no, women don't pray when they're menstruating, but let me expand on that. So it's not because women are impure. I'd like to clarify that, okay? I've said this before, women are not impure. Right. Now, some people think, oh, women become some kind of najas or impure, and in some cultures they do things, I mean, non-Muslim cultures, certain Hindu practices, and I think Tibetan, and I'm not sure, some other communities are known, they will send women out into a hut, and the woman must spend her time in that hut and things like this. Now, that is nonsense. It is stupid. Women and some Muslims have also inherited some of, not exactly that kind of practice, but similar to some Muslims. Just to clarify once again, women are not impure when they're on their menstruation. Okay, let's clarify that. Make it very clear. Yes, they are going through certain, obviously, hormonal and physical experiences, and that does place a certain amount of pressure on them, whether it's physical, whether it's psychological. Unquestionably, there's sometimes anxiety, sometimes stress. Things like this do happen, and it's very normal. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the hadith in Bukhari states, that the Prophet said, this is something, he said, look, don't be, because one of the women, she was embarrassed of her kind of menses. And the Prophet said, that, he said, don't be embarrassed about it. He said, إِنَّمَا هَذَا شَيْءٌ كَتَبَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى بَنَاتِ آدَمَ. This is something that Allah has set out in His laws of nature for the daughters of Adam. That this is nothing to be embarrassed about. Okay. Now, this, and when people say, oh, but the Prophet said, why did the Prophet say in some of the hadith that, oh, the women should they should be wary of entering the masjid if they're on their menses? Now, first of all, most of these hadith are not sahih. But this message of women staying away from the masjid at that time, if you look at the hadith of the women who come to the Prophet to complain, they complain of heavy bleeding. Now, you have to remember that in that day and age, they didn't have things like sanitary pads and things like this, and they didn't have, so it was difficult for people, and which could lead to just spontaneous kind of bleeding. It could lead to it could lead to staining the place where you are, to actual visibility of blood, to embarrassment in public, to things like this. So the Prophet said, he advised certain people that, look, when it's like this, to save, because people in societies, even in many parts of the world where they don't have things like where they don't have period pads and things like this, women become embarrassed. And the Prophet was trying to save them from becoming embarrassed. And he said, look, don't come into the masjid, or don't come into certain places if you know that's going on. Not because you're impure. He never said because you're impure, just to clarify that. Okay. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when people go through any kind of anxiety or any kind of hardship, which may have some level of hardship, Allah has always created ease for them. So hence, when a person is traveling, when a person is ill, when a person is, and I'm not saying that these have to, but even when you look at a person traveling, it's some kind of hardship. So Allah creates certain kinds of ease, like He might shorten the prayer, He might do certain things. But people are not always traveling. Whereas something like the menstrual cycle is every month upon a woman, generally speaking. So Allah has created ease by, as a sadaqah, He has forgiven that for them, that they do not need to pray that. And now this is in a hadith, it comes that if Allah gives you something as an act of charity, an act of generosity, فَقْبَلْهُ, that in a hadith that some person, I think, was traveling and he said, I want to, or there was a certain dispensation that he said, I don't want to accept it. And the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا ذَاكَ صَدَقَةُ اللَّهِ, that is a sadaqah of Allah, تَصَدَّقَ بِهِ عَلَيْكَ. And that Allah gave this act of generosity and charitably to you. فَقْبَلْ صَدَقَتَهُ, then accept His sadaqah. So when Allah charitably gives you an act of generosity, He says you do not need to pray, you do not need to fast, then don't try to, don't try to champion your piety by trying to challenge Allah. Like, Allah's given you this. He said, look, relax, you're going through certain things. You don't need to worry about your salah. So you don't need to act over pious that, no, I'm more pious than what Allah has. Allah said to me, you don't need to pray, but I'll show Allah. You don't need to do any of that. So that's, so women do not pray on their menstrual cycle, but take it as a bonus not as a, they don't. Doesn't need to be like a feministic reaction to this. Like, what the hell? What the hell? Who does Allah think that we're incapable of praying? I mean, yeah. So I read the other day that people were saying, referring to Allah in the as she. I mean, it doesn't get any dumber than that. For God's sake, take this feminism somewhere else, man. Allah is referred to by the default pronoun in Arabic, which is huwa. And that's in its nominative form, fi halat al-rafa, or in the other grammatical kind of forms, whether it's genitive or accusative, it's who or he, depending on its form. So this does translate as he in the English language, but it doesn't mean he as for gender. Like, it doesn't mean Allah is a man. It doesn't mean that, because God is not a man, unless, some anthropomorphic kind of people want to believe things like that, like God is some old man in the sky. He's not. But this is the default pronoun. So huwa also refers to it in the Arabic language as well, if it's a masculine. So all things by default in Arabic are masculine or feminine. So, and that doesn't mean sexual kind of like identity. It doesn't mean that. Okay, so just as a qalam, like a pen, is huwa, a kitab is huwa, it's it. Okay, so it's a masculine, it's not here, and there's other things which are here. But you don't refer to Allah as here or she, for God's sake. That is the dumbest thing I've heard. That's just like, I need a cause to fight for. I'm so bored. Right, so, right, moving on to more serious matters, people. Right, the allegations of sexual abuse and abuse within the UK's madrasas. Now, I want to first of all put this under the allegations of abuse as a as a generic umbrella term, because there is far more physical abuse that outnumbers the sexual abuse, which does exist as well. But I'm just saying I wanted to include all kinds of abuse, whether it's the emotional, the mental, the physical, sexual, all of these things that are taking place within the UK madaris. Now, there was this there was a Facebook post I came across by a person. His name is Umair Amjad. Right now, he's somebody who went to Darul Uloom Bury. It's in the UK, North England. Right now, it's one of the oldest madrasas within the UK. And he speaks of, in this Facebook post, of some sexual abuse that he underwent, unfortunately, whilst he was there. And I mean, and you can read it, and he speaks about some elder pupil, some elder student who was a prefect, I believe, in the madrasa. That means somebody on good terms with the teachers, and given this position of some authority over other students, that would sexually abuse other children in this madrasa in Darul Uloom Bury. I've heard that he sexually abused not only this person but other pupils as well. Now, this guy made a post, I think a few weeks ago. There's another person on Facebook by the name of Shah Lalam Amin. Right now, I might have written that wrong, but Shah Lalan Amin, I believe his name is. Right now, he wrote a post about undergoing so much physical abuse whilst being in the madrasa. that he was repeatedly beaten. In fact, his Facebook page it's full of many memoirs that he's sharing of his madrasa days when he and other students would be repeatedly and relentlessly beaten to a pulp. In his words, he says that they were beaten so often and so much that they just went numb to the whole thing. Now, this whole thing, look, I want to say something here. First of all, we need to understand that abuse is a very serious matter. Okay, this is not a kind of joke. It's not to be taken lightly. I visited this guy's page because I saw it. Some people shared it with me, and people were discussing it. This person, Umair. Now, I saw the comments being made on this post. Okay. People who were apparently graduates or from that same madrasa, who presumably are ulama, maulanas, right? Writing things like, just not, like, I don't want to quote some of the stuff that they were saying. Just things like, well, what do you expect if you went into a basement at night to get, do you expect, basically, isn't that what you're looking for? Some guy writing, these are like people, graduates from this madrasa. People at this madrasa, that were at this madrasa with him, saying, oh, I remember you from back then, you're lying, you're full of crap, you're like this, you're like that. You deserve, a certain sandwich and certain mayo, and you deserve this, and you deserve this, and you're a faggot, or you're like this, or you're like that. Wow, like are these the inheritors of the prophets? Is this what the madrasa have come down to? Even if, I'm not saying that the teachers in the madrasa are writing this, obviously they're not. But they are well aware. I said this once before when Abdul Rahim Limbada tried to unnecessarily, repeatedly was attacking me online and speaking about me. And I read out some of his posts where he ridiculously and sensually speaks about a young girl, 10 years old, and how fascinating her hair is or something because he sat behind her in some aeroplane. And I found that very disturbing. And I was like, well, does it really surprise me that these people who head and lead these Darul Ulooms, and I said then that they are aware of so many rape incidents within their madrasas. I said, I swear by Allah that they are aware of them. That these teachers some of them may be involved, or they either purposely turn a blind eye, or they're indifferent. They just don't care. If this not be true, look, some people are saying that this person is lying. I don't know. I don't know any of these people, by the way. Somebody, can you believe, check this out. Because I put a dua on this person's post, I read this thing. I don't know, I saw it. I read it, and I said, look, may Allah grant you and any victims of abuse ease. I said that, and may Allah clean these institutions of such filth. That's what I said. Ameen. People started commenting, these kind of graduates of his madrasa and these other people started commenting, oh, I bet Abu Layth funded you to come up with this allegation. Wow. And then people just started, they started swearing at me. Like, oh, homosexual swears and this and that. And I'm thinking, and some person shared this with me, said, oh, do you know that they've been speaking about you on this post? And I thought, what, me? Why me? And so I read, and this, I honestly cannot believe that the depth of stupidity that people will plummet to. Some people on this said, oh, Abu Layth likes attacking these institutes. Why? Look, I've always said I believe that madrasas can serve a great job if they will. But right now, these madrasas are at a ridiculously absurd standard. They are so low. They turn a blind eye to abuse. You know, in 2011, the BBC shared a study. We're talking 2011, about hundreds of cases of abuse that they said was the tip of the iceberg in madrasas. Physical abuse is a standard. Sexual abuse, although I'm not saying it's as common as physical abuse, but it is not uncommon in these places. And I guarantee you, all of these people that have graduated from these madrasas, these Maulanas, know of at least one case of sexual abuse that they have turned a blind eye to, because for the sake of these elders. Who on earth are these elders? Who do they think they are? They're not above the law, right? And they're definitely, I mean, these people are not God. I hope any of, whether it's this victim or any victim, I tell them, I urge them, go to the police, report these cases. And if these people like Limbada and all these other people, or whoever is in a position of power within these institutes, if they claim to be genuine and truly Islamic, then call for an investigation, call for an independent inquiry into these cases of abuse. Let's see how sincere you actually are. If you seriously, if you believe this stuff is false, if you believe that people are making up these stories, and I'm not saying some people ain't making up these stories, some people may be, but I know that there are genuine cases, and many of them. But if you believe that these are false, call for an independent inquiry, an investigation. Let it be transparent. Hell will they, because they know, just like everybody else, that this is going on. And if that be the case, then I'm telling you, if such cases, such people are meant to be the leaders of this faith, you are just producing. You know, I read some of the memoirs of that Shah Lalan Amin. I read some of them on his Facebook page, and he was speaking about now, after 20 odd years, he is coming to terms, and he said that he has finally reported them to the police. And I thought, well done. Because it is unacceptable, I tell you, it is unacceptable to tolerate dhulm. You should not ever, it is haram for these people to be conducting dhulm, but it is equally haram to let these people get away with it if you have the capacity to do something. Because when you let them get away with it, they will perpetrate that with others. Do not let them get away with it. Right? So, and if these people believe that they are being sincere and that they are against, then call into an independent investigation into these matters. Because if these matters are false, as you claim, then surely the evidence will demonstrate that. But that's what and I feel above anything, and this is not me trying to, some people said, oh, why are you against these? This is not about a sectarianism. I don't care what the madrasa is, whether it's a Salafi, Deobandi, Brelvi. These happen to be Deobandi madrasas, but it doesn't matter. I couldn't care less whether it's Shia, Sunni, whatever they are. But the truth is, if they are teaching people by beating them up, by torturing them, by emotionally abusing them, by sexually abusing them, then before anything, they have betrayed Allah and His Messenger. That's before anything. Before, it doesn't matter whether he puts Allama, Maulana, Shaykh al-Hadith, or, anything Biqari or anything before his name. That person has betrayed Allah and His Messenger. You have no loyalty to that person. Right? So I have nothing but stern words for any place, and it's a shame that our places that are meant to bring forth the inheritors of the prophets allow for the institutes to be infested with these kind of crimes. So, you know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cleanse these places, ameen. And my du'as and sympathies are with any victims. And I do urge people, if they have been victims, to contact their local police, to tell them to not let these people get away with this kind of stuff. Ye ab nahi chalega. Mulvi sahab, bahut ho gaya. You know, this is it's too much now. So that's my words for that. Right, now, okay, let's take 1-2 questions, then we've got to get to this village wars, people. This debate that's gone down between Asrar and Osman, we got to speak about that. So, I'll take 1-2 questions. I know some people had asked, do we live with jinns? What a... Do we live with jinns? Chakkar kya chal raha hai yaar? What do we live with jinns? I have a live-in relationship. I cohabit with many jinns. Look, the jinn is something that is unseen to humans. It's not... We don't live with them like... They're not like ghosts, like kind of living like that. It's just some kind of organism that, as Allah has explained, exists in a way that you cannot fathom. They may exist at a quantum level. They may. Which means, which would explain why they are... You can never see them. It's just an organism, some living organism, that you could never fathom, really. I mean, we just couldn't, because they just, you know, the way space... So the way things move through something, the reason you can't is because of the way the molecular formation, that it can't go through it. But certain things can. You see, like neutrinos and other things, they actually go through us. Countless. On a daily basis. And they emitted... You know, they come from outer space and they just constantly going through us. And they're only a recent discovery. And so this is why I think it's so amazing to learn about the world around us. But yeah, so, all right, let's take another question. Dark matter, yeah, things like this. I mean, we don't understand, but the reason I said about neutrinos is because like these things obviously pass through us and pass through everything. They pass through matter generally, and you know, it's just an example of how certain things are so microscopic and so at such a kind of quantum level that we can't understand them. Is it unethical of me to share the diversity of opinions of music to a youngster? Of course not. Music isn't haram. Claim they teach jinns. Some people have said they teach jinns. Even the angels must be looking at that guy thinking, yaar ye kar kya raha hai? He's got a class. It's like me saying, I teach electrons. I teach quarks. Acha, do you now? What was the partition of India good or bad thing? I've discussed that before. I don't know. In some ways, I wished maybe it all stayed as one, but history is history, I guess. Right, tafsir, do you believe that people were Muslims previously? Tafsir of... I'm not sure what verse you're referring to. We'll check it up another time. People were Muslims previously. When you say people were Muslims, they weren't Muslims like... I take it you mean like with previous prophets. They were people who submitted to the will of Allah, and hence they were called people who submitted, Muslims, but not Muslims as in they follow the fiqh and stuff like this like we do. Right, let's get on to this. Any other... Was there anything... Somebody had asked a question about ijma. I've spoken about this previously in much detail, right? People, there is no such thing in essence as ijma. I mean, there is some basis for it, but in essence, ijma was about the collected, the kind of inherited living tradition of Islam. And it was to do with the early Muslims and to do with creed. How do you know whether somebody... I've got a clip on this explaining it in more detail. So basically, there's certain verses in the Quran that if you take them literally, it shows that by doing any sin, you could be a kafir. How do we know those verses are not literal? Well, the early community inherited that understanding from the Prophet, from early Islam, the companions. They never understood these verses ever like that. That could be called loosely a kind of ijma, if anything. The ijma, which was to do with these matters of creed and not calling people kafir and so on, later on got introjected into fiqh. And this is just a myth. Muslims, there is no consensus on consensus. Nobody can even agree on what ijma means. It's stupid. Ijma is just, this is a stupid, bizarre concept. That check this out, it's not even the ijma of Muslims, it's the ijma of scholars. Which is so absurd, because who is a scholar? Like, who is a scholar? Let's say I'm a Mufti, I'm a scholar. People would say, what are you on about? You're a kafir. Now just for a moment, pause. The way they are responding to me, make no mistake, this is exactly the same throughout every century of Islam. You just pick certain scholars in Islam, go to their day and age. They may be celebrated figures today. In their own day and age, they were, many of them, mocked, ridiculed, called kafir. Take Imam Abu Hanifa as an example. In his own day and age, they hated his guts, ridiculed him, called him, kafir. They treated him like a kafir. They said when he died, these were great scholars of his time. They were saying, thank God he died. Well, they were people like Sufyan al-Thawri hated him. And yet, today, he's an amazing, we love him. But the point is, Imam Bukhari, they hated him whilst he was alive. So, my point is that many scholars in their day and age were not the way people today are. I know people are saying, why is he giving himself as an example? Just to show you the level of hatred. See, when I mention myself, you understand, the level of hatred. When I say people like Imam Abu Hanifa, you can't kind of mentally grasp the level of hatred. So it's the same thing. So it's an ijma of the scholars only, not the common Muslim. They don't give a damn about the common Muslim. Then, so first of all, we don't know who the common scholars are. Secondly, only the Sunni scholars. Where are the Shia Muslim? Are they part of this ijma? That's a fascinating one. Are the Shia part of this ijma? Because people will say, no. Say, so they're kafir. No. So so this ijma is just a gang of it's crazy. And from that, let's move on to more interestingly right, somebody's asked to speak about the Tawhidi versus Haqiqat Jew part 2. I haven't watched the part 2. I'm going to watch it. So hopefully on Monday night, I will discuss that. Let's move on to this debate, people. Alright. What was it? WrestleMania. Alright. Who remembers the good old WrestleMania? WrestleMania 6, people. That was the one. I was a kid. That was the one. Hulk Hogan versus Warrior. Not that these people resemble any of them. Warrior was a legend, man. Oh, alright. I was a big fan of Warrior, man. I used to have a massive poster of him in my bedroom. I'm a proper Warrior fan. Right, so Right now, people, village wars have continued. So what have we got here? Sheikh Asrar, Mullah Molvi Asrar Rashid decided to debate Maulana or Molvi Usman. I've forgotten his surname, but Maulana Usman. So this was to do with the blasphemies of the Barelvi Akabir, the Barelvi seniority, the scholars, beginning with Ahmad Raza Khan Barelvi Sahib himself, and then other leading Barelvi scholars.